Okay, well, I guess we can just join a couple minutes early here. Um, Good morning from Riverton as we try to get everything moved around here, figure out what's going on. This has been a very crazy and busy week, and I just want to get everybody filled in on what's going on. I mean, we're gonna have it may be good news, maybe bad news, it may be somewhere in between. Um, Feel free to get on the chat. Oh my God, I did it right this morning. Good morning, BJ Mora. Glad to have you with us here this morning on the chat. First of all, with everything that's going on right now, with COVID-19, and we got double hit, almost triple hit. Between we got COVID-19, we've got the rulemaking. I'm also got a commercial client I'm working with right now quite a bit, so we're trying to do some creative stuff for them, and so it's keeping us busy. It's keeping the money coming in during this whole crisis. REC has been under an operational delay on a lot of things as a result of mostly the COVID and then eventually the rulemaking draft. And so we're starting to catch up now. So for those of you who've asked for renewals, who filed easy forms and such, we're going to start sending out the invoices here over the next few days and get that going. And just a reminder that for stations that are in what's the next step here? Michigan and Ohio. Michigan and Ohio stations. Couple things, just a reminder. The FCC has waived your requirements to do pre-file announcements. So stations that are in Michigan and Ohio, you're not required to do the pre-file. You are still required to do the post-file. Post-file announcements are statutory requirement. They're required under the Communications Act. The pre-file is not. So the FCC can can waive the pre-file and still stay within statute. The FCC, if they wanted to, they could also reduce the number of messages on the post file, and I wish they would do that. I'm not pushing the issue with the FCC necessarily, but I wish they would consider doing that, especially because that will take a little bit of a burden off of the broadcast stations during this time when we're seeing AM stations going silent right now. We're seeing we're seeing commercial broadcast stations furloughing, letting people go, killing morning shows, doing a lot of things right now because the money's not there. I'm also hearing it from the non-com side, both in the full service and in the low power, that that there's a lot of issues right now where the underwriting is just not there. People are waiting for their stimulus checks and such, and it's just going to we're just in a time where we really have to switch into this real public service mode. Excuse me. And then they throw this whole damn 19193 surprise on us this month. Why did they have to do it this month? I was willing to wait a couple more months for this, for the whole thing with LPFM, because I mean, it's not like we're going to get a window anytime here very soon. Just some insights. This week I did have some calls this week with FCC staff, both at the in the Media Bureau and in Commissioner staff. We're going to talk about that in just a bit, but first, the renewals. We are starting to. We still have another 12% of LPFMs out there in Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee that still need to file their renewals. These are the ones that we are aware of that still have not filed. So if you know any of these stations or you work with any of these stations, they need to file their renewal like now. Remember that while the FCC does give some grace period, there is the possibility of a forfeiture. There's 8 stations down there that from the previous window, from the Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi window, that still haven't filed. Their drop dead date is June 1st. They've got to file by June 1st. We did have a case where a forfeiture of $1,500 was proposed on an LPFM for filing late. They actually submitted some paperwork saying that they are such a small church that they don't even have a bank account. And they were able to get the forfeiture canceled, and the forfeiture was replaced by a hand slap. So, fun times. Fun times we are having here in beautiful here at Club Riv, home of the quarantine. And at least one thing, at least we got eggs. We've got eggs here. I know there's an egg shortage going on right now, but our girls are pooping them out right now down there. So yeah, we definitely have the eggs here and such. So worst comes to worst, lots of scrambled eggs for the Michi. Anyway, let's get on with with everything that's going on this week with the rulemaking and the MB Docket 19193. And I know that's probably why a lot of you folks are here. Again, if you have any questions, any comments, or anything, any questions, even if they're off topic, just drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them. This is basically what the FCC had put in the draft. Mainly the DAs with proof of performance and the directional antennas with proof of performance and surveyor confirmation. Minor moves up to 11.2 kilometers. That's really good. That's a good change. And we could even go further if we could show a contour overlap. But the 11.2 will pretty much cover a large majority of minor moves, and in some cases may even allow for a minor move of an LPFM where there is no contour overlap, say like from one side of a mountain to the other. So it does this version of the rule does open up some interesting issues. There's some interesting opportunities for LPFM stations. So we're not going to fight this one. This is a good one. Codify the LPFM cross ownership of FFM boosters. This, remember, boosters are not for everybody. There's very few of you out there that will benefit from boosters. Channel 6 protection requirement discussion deferred until after the summer of next year. That's the time when analog low-power TV stations have to either switch to digital or go off the air. The rules for LPFM on Channel 6, there's currently a distance separation rule. A couple things that are being added with that is that they can you can get if you get concurrence from the Channel 6 broadcaster, whether it's a full service or a low power TV Channel 6 station, that will suffice. And this is consistent with translator policy. Also, too, another thing that the FCC has agreed to is the ability to use a contour overlap model to waive the 73825 channel 6 rules. This is for an LPFM station going on frequencies 88.1 to 91.9, and the contour rule is what REC asked for. REC asked for the contour rule, and so pretty much the way that would work, just very briefly, is the TV station, whether it's an analog or digital, is given a 47 dB protected contour. And then what will happen is that depending on the frequency, the FM frequency, the interfering, you'll have a different interfering contour for each of the 20 FM frequencies. And then in order to meet, in order to make a claim of no interference, the interfering contour of the LPFM cannot overlap the 47 dB of the TV station. And pretty much you're going all the way from like 54 dB, which is a huge contour for 88.1, down to something like, I think, 90 dB or something like that for 91.9. So it progressively, the interfering contour progressively gets smaller as you go up in frequency. And that's how that works. So this is if you are very close to a channel 6 station. And, this is to address the issue that we talked about with LPFM overprotecting low-power TV claim. Under the FCC was running with the assumption that every low-power TV station was 3 kilowatts at 100-something meters above average terrain, which is anything but the truth. FCC rejects LP250. We're going to talk about that. FCC rejects LPFM translator relief. That's the use of contours instead of distance separation to protect translators. This is an issue that it's not that we're not interested in taking it, but because of the way that the draft was written and because of the bandwidth that's available to us and available to those I work with at the commission, it was not, I only have limited time to talk to people. And really, we could not bring up the translator relief issue in during the discussions. Unfortunately, it was for us to bring up translator relief. That means I would have had to have taken away from LP250, and that means I would have had to taken away from other things like directional antennas, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. It's also inconsistent. Right now, the FCC is on this mindset that LPFM needs to be this overly simplistic service. And no matter how much we tell them about how LPFM stations are not using, that LPFM stations are using people, hired help like myself and Paul Boehm and Todd Urich and Clay Leander and such who have access to contours and who are filing contour type applications. The problem is that we're still seeing a lot of amateurly done applications. And I think the FCC is just wants to keep this simple because they don't want, I just don't think that they want those without experience even engaging in the contour overlap model. the FCC has always wanted to keep this service so simple that you didn't need a consulting engineer. And and of course, for those of us who know, well, guess what? We know better. And that's where we're at there. So that's why we're not pushing translator relief. The one thing I did say to the commission, though, and to the commissioners and staff, is I said I can't guarantee that translator relief will not come up in reconsideration. I would see. I would think that the LPFM coalition or Paul Bain on behalf of Prometheus or somebody like that will try to run the translator relief issue forward. And I would totally invite them to bring this in reconsideration. Would reconsideration delay the window? No. My opinion, it would not. The window is already delayed. The window is already delayed because of everything going on and other issues, and we'll talk about that. But that's where we're at on this. EAS decoders, LPFM stations that are time sharing, same transmitter site, can now share. Will be able to share EAS decoders. This was a controversy that came up. There was a station in Portland that was time shared and was running, and they wanted to run a single EAS unit, and so now under this they would be able to. And also too, even though most of you, not all of you, but most of you are doing it, in the event of a silent, we're finally getting the rule put in stone now that says that you do have to file a silent STA. And we have too many LPFMs out there that have been running for years. I mean, that have been off the air for years. And we'll just have to see what happens. We'll talk about We'll talk about Auction 106 here in just a bit, because it all comes up in the issues with the timeline. So, what we talked about this week, I had met with the audio division at the FCC, the audio division of the Media Bureau. I've also met with the media advisors for all 5 commissioners. So we talked to the minority, we talked to the majority, we talked to the chairman's media person. So we've talked to both sides. We got pretty much the same message out to all 5. And some folks are some folks were a little more receptive than others. Some folks like Commissioner O'Reilly's person, who I would expect this from, was just, okay, basically, yes, thank you for the information, now go away. That kind of, it gave me that kind of attitude. Did not use those exact words. Okay, so don't quote me on that. They did not use those exact words. But I just kind of got the I just kind of got a little bit of the brush off in that specific case. But that's what you have to expect when you are when you're working with a lot of these folks. And and of course the person I work with, who's Ajit Pai's, Chairman Pai's media advisor, somebody I've been working with for years, and we have a fantastic relationship. So that is that's what's going on there. So what I did was we went ahead and really we're pushing to simplify LP 250. And there they are. So there's there's what we are. That's what we're proposing. We're proposing that LP 250 be done basically in a manner same exactly as LP 100. Distance separation only. So the outer contours, the backstops that we proposed in RM 11810, and the foothill effect rules in 11749, not there. Distance separations would be extended to honor the full 20-kilometer buffer zone. Apparently, this was not a point of contention in 2012. But it was a point of contention this year with the FCC. The FCC wants that full 20-kilometer buffer zone. They feel that the definition, the Section 3 LCRA definition of minimum distance separations was not just the numbers, but also the formula that reached those numbers. So in other words, interfering contour, LPFM interfering contour plus plus FM protected contour plus 20. That's basically what the message that was sent to me in that draft report and order. And we're still kind of discouraging LP 250 in the original construction permit window, because there may be, if we start stations off as LP 100s, this will better gauge the demand for LP2 for LPFM, any low power FM in any community, and also too it will reduce the number of MX groups, the number of groups that are mutually exclusive, and that would be and that would be it. And with the fewer MX groups that we have, the more stations we will have, because as stations get into an MX group, some of them will get dismissed, and your chances of being dismissed may be higher when you're in an MX group, or you may be stuck with a timeshare in when you don't need one. So that's what we're proposing. The other issue that the FCC we're dealing with is the directional antenna issue. Keeping in mind that when we went into this, we were still in RM 11810, which included a couple of very lavish things in there, including the backstops, the use of contours as an outer protection for LPFM stations, especially at the 250 level, what we called the 73-815 regime, which was a hybrid of the minimum distance separations as required by statute, along with a contour model similar to translators. The FCC really didn't like that, and especially since we proposed the numbers at LP10 level, based on the Commission's use of, depending on numbers, and keeping in mind that LP10 numbers were still on the books when the LCRA was signed. So we pulled out of that whole LP10 argument. I said, okay, we'll go to LP100 numbers. Okay, and we went to LP100 numbers in comments in 19193, and then in the draft R&O that just came out, they said, hey, that's not good enough. It's like, well, why didn't you tell us that the first time? This is the first we're hearing about a 20-kilometer buffer zone. And this is the first, that we're hearing about this. And so, so yeah, that's what we're looking at on that. Now the other issue, I got derailed. We're talking about directional antennas, not LP250. Just LP250 came up in that conversation. So that was one of the needs for directional antenna, was the use of directional antennas for doing these funky contour protected, outer contour protected, trying to squeeze an LPFM, maybe not a full 250 watts, maybe a 200 watt LPFM, or maybe a directional antenna to get them by something that might be on its side or something. Hard to say, but that's what that was the idea for using directional antennas there. Now, of course, use directional antennas to protect other translators. That is obvious, because that's exactly what the translators are doing right now. We're basically trying to do translator rules with we're trying to use translator rules to protect translators from LPFM stations, and because that's not an LCRA issue. So we have, statutorily it's sound, but again, the FCC did not want it because they wanted simplicity. They wanted circles instead of curves. Simple as that. Circles instead of curves. So with that said, that was really the two main reasons for wild, free-for-all kind of directional antenna use. So let's say this. We take away directional antennas from the LP250 since we're not going to use contours anymore. It's going to be strict 100 or 250, nothing in between. And we also take away the translator interference protections. We are left with the original two reasons for LPF, that LPFMs can currently do directional antennas. First is the rule that's existed since 2001, which allows state and local governments that operate the stations as public safety stations for travelers' information. They're allowed to use directional antennas. Our last inventory showed that there are no state licensed stations right now that are using directional antennas in this manner. This was something that New York State Thruway Authority asked for back in 2000, 2001, and they did launch stations back in the early 2000s. I remember when I was in Syracuse, New York one time when I was working for Quest, and I heard one of their stations there. I don't remember if they were running directional antennas at that time. I assume that they might have been. The other one is the second adjacent channel waiver. Second adjacent channel waivers have been done since 2012. I have written several, including, believe it or not, including composite designs that the FCC has accepted. They've worked very well, and we don't have any complaints on those. When I talked to the commission about why these two situations have been allowed and not needing a surveyor and proof of performance, the attitudes that I've gotten was that, well, first of all, the directional antenna use in for the public safety, is not it's not being done to protect stations. They still have to, they're still considered non-directional. It's just, if anything, they're cutting their coverage and focusing their coverage on one particular area, such as to reduce power consumption. And in the case of second adjacent channel waivers, there is a remediation policy already in place, and that is with the second the second adjacent remediation policy, which is also in statute in the Local Community Radio Act. It's in Section 3 of the LCRA, where the FCC mandates that that the Congress mandates that there is a remediation process. Now, when I proposed directional antennas, the original directional antenna proposal in 11810, I specifically stated in there that if anybody uses any of the things that would have triggered directional antennas, like LP250 or the translator relief, that it would also trigger them into a regime where they would have the translator style remediation. I had already thought of that when this went up, and I already thought that we were going to need a different remediation method. So with those two items off the table, this leaves us with two additional reasons for directional antennas in LPFM. And that is the international agreements issue. And the FCC is going to allow us to, for LPFM stations that are within 125 kilometers of Mexico. This is something I asked for a while back. Right now, LPFM stations within 125 kilometers of Mexico are limited to a 50-watt non-directional signal, regardless of their, even if they're, regardless of where they're at. It's 50 watts is the limit. So, and translators are required to do 50 watts, but they can use a directional antenna. So the 50 watts can only needs to appear in the directions that if you measure from the transmitter site along that bearing, along that radial to the Mexican border, the distance is 125 kilometers or less. So that means, like, for example, you could run 100 watts, or in the case of translators, 250 to the north, as long as you keep the area to the south at less than 50 at 50 watts, and and that is allowed under the international agreement. There's also provisions in both the Canada and the Mexico aspect side of things that limit the sizes of the interfering contour. There's also a service contour limit on the Mexico side. These DAs would benefit mainly Mexico, would benefit mainly the Tucson area stations. You know, the North San Diego County stations, those that are maybe not necessarily right smack bab on the border, like El Paso or Nogales, but would benefit those that are a little more inland. Although, you know, a station in you know, an LP in Nogales could do the same thing. I mean, you know, could do the same thing, or in El Paso or somewhere could do the same thing if, you know, if they use a very directional antenna like a CLFM or a CA5 or something like that. They could probably do it. But, you know, we want to leave the option open for them, and the only way that this can be done is with a directional antenna. You got to have a directional antenna to do this. And, you know, honestly, for like Tucson, you could use, you know, if you can use a Nikon BKG 77 and point it due north with 100 watts ERP and using their specs. The back end of that antenna is only about 45 watts, and if it's spaced correctly, you know, if there's enough spacing between that antenna and the Mexican border, you could pull it off. We were able to demonstrate it for Tucson. Now, using a BKG, we wouldn't be able to demonstrate it much closer, just because that there's a very narrow area of that antenna that's less than 50 watts on 100 watts ERP to the peak. So in those cases further down, we'd have to use something more like a, you know, more like a Scala, Yagi, or log periodic type antenna. So those were the only two reasons. Those are the only two real reasons that that we would be adding in this rulemaking that would justify directional antennas. Now, some people think, oh, but directional antennas will make you go farther. You know, that is freaking amateur radio way of thinking. You know, this is broadcast. We deal with effective radiated power, not transmitter power output. So if you have a, you know, if you have 100 watts transmitter power output, and you're on an antenna with 7 dB of gain, yeah, you're going to get out pretty far. But the way that broadcast works is that the power is not rated on FM. The power is not rated based on the power from your transmitter. It's based on the power leaving the antenna. So you have 100 watts leaving the antenna, and you've got to be able to get to that point. So if you're using a gain antenna, like, let's use a non-directional, the Norwalk Dominator. I think it's got like a 4 dB gain or 3 dB gain or something like that. You use a gain antenna, you use low loss cable, you're going to have a net gain. So in order to put 100 watts in at the antenna, your transmitter is going to probably have to be maybe like 50, 60 watts. It's going to be under 100, and that's how we do it. So there's no need to say, oh, well, directional antennas are going to help LPFM stations get out further. No, if anything, for an LPFM station where the directional antenna does not serve a particular specific purpose that we talked about, it's actually going to limit your coverage. So it won't work for most of you, but for those that it does need, that we do need. Now, the reason why we're pushing this so hard with the FCC is because the FCC is putting on this requirement that's currently applies to full service stations which use directional antennas to protect other stations' contours, which is really not the case here. That per se. And they want us to be. They want a couple things. First of all, if we use anything other than an off-the-shelf antenna, let's say I get on the Scala program here and I design two CLFMs to point in two different directions to make a custom kind of like a peanut pattern in order to protect maybe a house or two on a second adjacent waiver, but still cover most of the area that I need to. They're going to want a proof of performance from the manufacturer, and they're going to want, and in all cases, they're going to want you to hire a surveyor, somebody to come out and verify that that antenna is pointed in the right direction. This is not required of translators. And when asked why, it's because translators have the remediation policy put in place. This is the 74-1203F and 1203A and 1204F, which is exactly what I proposed in 11810 for directional antennas. So they have that process. And like I told them, I said, listen, for directional antennas for international, there is already a remediation process. It's the international complaint process that right now, if if the IFT down in Mexico wants to complain about the operation of a station in the United States, they could file a complaint through international channels to the FCC through the International Bureau for it to reach to the Media Bureau to handle the complaint. So there's already a remediation policy already in place for the international agreements. The other thing that we're wanting to add, the directional antennas should be allowed for, are those very rare cases that we talked about earlier where we need to use a directional antenna to protect a channel 6 for an LPFM below 92. These are the only reasons, really, for them to, really need a directional. These are the only reasons an LPFM would need a directional antenna, honestly. And and so we're not pushing carte blanche, as the NAB puts it, directional antennas. We're still trying to keep the directional antenna limited, just like they are today. All we're asking is for two additional scenarios, and that is the issue of what you call it here. That it's let's see. I think I've got a. Where do we have it here? Number 7. There we go. This is basically what we're saying is that these are the reasons, and as the give back for this, for eliminating this cross the board DA allowance, we want that proof of performance and surveyor verification removed, and making it consistent with translators. It's only fair. It is only fair. So those are the big issues that we talked about. Also, channel 6. Of course, the whole issue with channel 6 has been diverted till after summer of next year because of the analog shutdown. One of the issues that came up by ABC was concerned about the FCC allowing waivers of 73825 in respect for the very few LPFM stations that would be proposing operation down below 92. And what they wanted was a notification process where the LPFM applicant would just simply send a notification to the television licensee, whether it's full power or low power. And when I first thought about it, I thought, okay, maybe that's a little bit too much. And of course, I'm always thinking, okay, what can we do that would work under existing process without any much of a burden? And so I thought, okay, well, why don't we just have them publish it in the FCC could publish it in the broadcast applications public notice with the call letters of the station that the waiver is being requested on, similar to how second adjacent was done during the window. And and then I thought about it, and it's like, there's going to only be a very few number of stations down there, and so why not just notification? All it is just a letter in the mail sent to the licensee that says, hey, we filed and we requested a waiver of 73825. I would include the engineering information to show the compliance and everything like that with the notification. And there's really no harm, no foul by doing that. I just now then when I thought about it and I thought about what the impacts would be, that's pretty much about it there. Yeah, a lot of interesting comments here. I'm going to go through these here in just a sec here, and a lot of good people, a lot of people talking about a lot of good things here. So let's find our way down the let's find our way down the chat here a little bit. Good morning, Michelle, from Joe and Brock and BJ and Katrina Radio. Good morning to all of you. BJ Moore has asked, are there a lot of reserve band LPFMs? I imagine in the rural areas there would be. Right now there's not, and the main reason for this is the overprotection of Channel 6. The assumption that all Channel 6 stations are running, all Channel 6 low-power TV stations are running these massive facilities. And, the FCC made it simple many years ago by just using one distance separation number for all assuming that all LPTV stations, low power TV stations, were created equal. And in a showing, we showed that out of the hundreds or so of Channel 6 LPTV stations at the time, only a small number of them, maybe like about less than a dozen, were actually anywhere near those full facilities. And that was our argument to go to the contour model, that similar to the translators in 73825. So that was the reason that that's the reason why we pushed that. The FCC, apparently, they apparently pushed through with that. The original idea was that we would do that contour overlap thing, because and then the NPRM came out, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and then they threw this total surprise on us that they just want to eliminate all the Channel 6 restrictions together. That was a total surprise. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming at all. And now that they've deferred discussion on that, I think that's the reason why they brought the contour overlap waiver method in, because I think they recognize that is sound, and especially since there's going to still be a Channel 6 rule for now, then the number of opportunities will be reduced. BJ Moore asks, are there a lot of reserve band LPFMs? I imagine in the rural areas there are, and really because of these overprotections, there's not. There's only a handful of LPFMs down below 92. Now, with this change in the rules that's coming up, yeah, there could be an increase. But in a lot of these cases, these are cases where they would have to use the waiver method, or they would have to get they'd have to get concurrence from the Channel 6. And right now we don't have concurrence in our rule, but with this we will have concurrence. And then again, the FCC will deal with any kind of additional elimination or reduction of Channel 6 protection requirements after the analog sunset. There's also some talk about it in another docket, MB Docket 03185, which talks about the future of the Franken FM stations. And we ran reports here of LPFM potential after the in the event that the full Channel 6 was eliminated. I mean, yeah, it would open up opportunities, but you got to realize another thing too. is that there's also being planned right now is a full service window for NCE. And if you read the draft report in order very carefully, they do discuss very briefly. They discuss filing windows for both full service non-commercial stations in the reserve band below 92, as well as for LPFM. And originally the FCC the audio division wanted to do LPFM first, and then do NCE. And my position on that is that's a bad idea, especially if they're talking about getting rid of all Channel 6 protection requirements, or even putting in the waiver, even putting in the contours policy that they're putting in as a waiver policy here. The reason is that you're going to have LPFM stations that are going to be applying for those reserve band channels, and then maybe a few months or a year later, you're going to have a full service window that's going to where full service stations were going to be able to apply for the same channels, because remember, they're primary and LPFM is secondary. So it would make more sense to put the NCE window before the LPFM window, just to avoid this problem. Second of all, the full power stations are only required to protect full service TV, which currently right now in the United States there's about 10 full service Channel 6 stations across the country, and I'm aware of like 1 or 2 other proposed allotments right now, and that's it. LPFM and translators have to also protect a myriad of low power TV stations across the country. So that's so that's where they're at. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, and I think Al is kind of cluing into this slightly in the comment he just posted, is the other thing that's really keeping LPTV stations out of the reserve band is the fact that NCE, the non-commercial stations down below 92, they space each other by contours instead of by distance separation like they do in the commercial band for the full service stations. So but LPFM still uses distance separation. So let's say you've got a small college or a high school, let's say somewhere like in New Jersey or somewhere up in the Northeast, that might have been one of the original Class D stations, and they decided to upgrade to in order to stay on the air, they had the opportunity to upgrade. And let's say they upgraded to a Class A. They might have gone to like 150 or 200 watts, and they got their primary status many years ago. Well, that 200-watt station at 30 or 40 meters above average terrain, it's still protected like a 6,000-watt at 100 meters above average terrain Class A station by LPFMs. So that reduces the availability in the reserve band naturally even more. Reserve band stations many of them are massively over, the smaller Class A stations, the former Class Ds that upgraded, those stations are way overprotected by LPFM, and we have statute that won't allow us to do anything different there. They're Class A. If they're 101 watts or whether they're 6,000 watts and they're Class A, they're protected like they're 6,000 watts. So that's going to reduce opportunities in the reserve band, just right there. But there would be some reserve band opportunities here in Riverton if they were to eliminate the Channel 6 requirements altogether. I have 2 channels available here that I could use. One of them is a really good channel too. There's one really good channel I could use here, and my guess is it's going to be that channel is definitely going to be sucked up into the next reserve band window. So we'll see how it all goes there. But we got fun times there. How long can it take to report a new date for the FM auction window that was just recently canceled? Well, obviously the issues with the windows coming up here. I mean, the COVID-19 did play a piece on this window, but I have a feeling, and is another reason that is blocking our. Okay, we are about to get invaded by a cat. For those of you who watched my personal Facebook this morning, we are getting invaded by a cat. There's the cat. And we've been distracted. The other issue, and we're starting to see this right now with the boosters, is LMS. LMS is just not handling things correctly. And right now, we're starting to see boosters, new boosters that are being applied for. And when they come into the database, at least from what the public can see, they're coming in really messed up. We just had a couple booster license grants here in the last couple days, a couple license to cover apps on boosters. First of all, they're putting these new facilities in facility IDs up in the 700,000s. And, so obvious. Okay, so we know where the new LMS facilities go. So just keep in mind that when a new facility is filed for during a window or whatever, it's going to be either 700,000 or 800,000 is the facility ID number. But we're seeing a lot of problems right now with LMS. And I just cannot imagine putting hundreds of new applications in during like the Auction 106 follow-up filings. I just, the long form filings, I just don't see that happening, and especially with the filing window. I don't think LMS is ready. I did see a comment below, and I just want to clarify one thing. He said, let's see. Let's see. Joe Donaldson says, Tom Hutton personally told me that they were going to have another window around 2023, and that my 2013 application had a facility number, and it would be first in line when the next window opened. Okay, couple things there. Number one is that we're at a point here where, obviously we don't know when the windows are going to be. 2023, early 2023 does sound reasonable for LPFM. I'm hoping we can get into 2022. What I was hoping before the whole coronavirus thing happened was that we would have the Auction 106 take place this spring and summer. And then in late 2020, early 2021, we could have the full-service NCE reserve band window. And then we go through the analog shutdown for low-power TV, figure out where these LPTV stations are going to go, figure out what's going to be the fate of the Franken FMs after the sunset. And then after that time in late 2021 or early 2022, we would open up the LPFM window. Those were that was the timeline I've been working with. That I've told Media Bureau many times that was my preferred timeline for the upcoming. Of course, they're the ones that call the shots there. I can only make suggestions, and but that would have been my preferred way of handling this. The other issue about first in line. First of all, if you have an application pending, if you have an application sitting right now from that you originally wrote in like 2013 or 2014, and it's got a facility ID number on it, it's gone. It's not going to be fileable because we're not using CDBS anymore for filing applications. So when the next window comes up, and this is one of the problems, we don't have a good LMS is not properly handling applications for new stations. It will do a petition for rulemaking for a new allotment, but that's about it. It will not do a new station. We're having a problem right now with Alaska because of this, with the Class Ds. I mean, the Alaska Class D filing has pretty much come to a standstill because of the LMS problems. This was another issue I addressed with the commission on this a while back, was the Class D issue. Until this is fixed, we're not going, we're not going to have any kind of filing where you could go in and file, like get everything prepared and ready to go. Also keep in mind that with all these changes that are coming around, that may require a form change. So even if we were still in CDBS, if you had a 318 sitting in the system, it may not be the valid 318 form that would be in effect at the time of the window. Also, another thing, first in line, your spot in line and when you filed the application during a window does not matter. When the window opens, the window will open for like 7, 14 days, whatever. The last one was open for quite a long time because of the government shutdown. But what will happen is Joe, I'm just explaining how the filing window will work. When the filing window opens, everybody files their applications. It doesn't matter what day, what time, as long as you filed during that window period. What will happen is that the FCC will suppress those applications from view, so nobody can see what anybody else is doing. And then after the window closes, the FCC will eventually open up the floodgates and show all the applications that were filed. Any application that was filed during that window is treated equally as being filed at the same time on the same day at the same time. There's no first come, first serve in that case like there is with minor modifications. That's how the filing window is going to work. So lower facility ID numbers aren't going to get you anything better. Earlier filing dates during the window are not going to get you anything better. What's going to matter is your qualifications, how many points that you meet, and in the event of a tie, the age of your organization. Those are the things that are going to matter where it comes to a filing window, as far as timing and such. Not when you filed it. You could file it you could be the first to file, or you could be the very last to file, as long as you file. That's all that matters. And so that's what we've got there. Good morning, Kevin. I see you in there too. Right now, let's let the window periods go as they go right now, because the FCC does have a lot of fixing to do right now. The FCC recognizes a couple things here. First, the FCC realizes that LMS is an issue, and unfortunately, it is like an outsourced type of system, I guess, and they've got a lot of work to do on that. I was telling Pi's person about the REC bug list that's on our homepage of all the issues that we have with LMS that have been reported to REC. I mean, the list is huge. This has got to be taken care of before 1,000, 2,000 applications go into the system. They've got to fix LMS. Otherwise, this is going to be a huge burden on staff to clean these up. I mean, we're finally getting some of the booster applications done during this time. It's crazy. I can tell you this, though. The current division chief of the audio division, Al Schuldner, is very supportive of LPFM. Overall, he is very supportive of LPFM. That's why he wanted to do an LPFM window before an NCE window. And I had to tell him it doesn't make sense because you're going to hurt LPFMs more if you do it that way. But he is very enthusiastic about LPFM. Also, too, the person who sat in his seat before him, Pete Doyle, was very enthusiastic about full power NCE, and he wanted a full power NCE window. Now he's finally getting it, even though he's no longer at the commission. So there is enthusiasm. For LPFM and in the bureau. Unfortunately, they are tied. And I think what it is and they're not going to necessarily tell me this. And even if they did, off the record, I would have to keep it off the record here. Is that I really don't think that they want to deal with amateurish looking applications, and they don't want to be burdened with garbage, because honestly, especially the 2000 window, there was a ton of garbage that was filed in the window. There was garbage that was filed in the 2013 window, and people were misreading things, misunderstanding things. They were stealing my content from the websites that were around at that time and trying to use that information to justify things, and it really wasn't the case. That's just not going to work. This is one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of like channel search tools and things like that right out in the open from REC at this time, because we've had a problem with people stealing our content to file applications, and half of the time they don't know what they're doing when they use that information. So that's what we got there. Let's see. Agree with discouraging LP250 applications for the original construction permit phase. More opportunities. Hopefully LP250 upgrade for original and existing stations will be relatively painless. In RM11749, we talked about a automatic upgrade policy kind of similar to what the FCC did many years ago for Class A when they went from 3 to 6 kW. I would say this is for any new station that's in an area where you think you're going to get LP250, even if you're not, aspire by spending the extra money up front and getting a decent antenna. Get a 2-bay circular polarized antenna, something with unity gain, something that is not going to put an additional huge loss on there, something that's going to keep your transmitter power output down, because if you put up a single bay antenna, single bay circular, you already got a 3 dB loss there. You're going to have a loss in the cable. Right now you're running a lot of these single bay stations, they're running in the high 200s right now in transmitter output for an LP100. If you run a single bay and you're running a 250, that means you're going to be needing to run about 600, and you're going to be running a much higher amount from the transmitter. And there are there's a very limited number of certified transmitters that'll go above 300 watts. So if you are considering going LP250 and you think and everything tells you that you look good for LP250, if LP250 does happen, plan early. 2-bay antenna or a Norwalk dominator, something with gain, something that doesn't put loss at the antenna. Even a ground plane, although I'm not a huge fan of the ground planes, but even just a simple ground plane would do the trick. All right, let's see what else we got here in the chat. Marsh Johnson Sr., good morning from Oregon. Yes, good morning. Let's see. Thank you for the help with the minor change construction permit. Great work. We have construction permit in hand, starting construction next week. I recommend folks use your services to file applications. Kudo Michi, thank you. Thank you very much. And remember to let me know when you are ready to go. Once you're constructed and on the air, let me know so we can file a license to go. Let's see. Let's see what we got here. Michelle, I was just telling you what he said and that I received it. Our ministry here in Houston was the victim of fraud by a translator who made promises he didn't keep in order to get us to withdraw our LPFM application. Tom said he couldn't reinstate the app, but we would be first in line when the next LPFM window opened. If he doesn't keep his word, lawsuits will soon start flying. There's there's no there is no first in line. Everybody is once the window happens, everybody is equal. Everybody's equal when the window opens. And if your application during that window is a singleton or is able to outscore the others, or if you're in an MX situation, if you're able to find an alternate channel or reach a settlement with the other MX participants, then you'll get it. What may have happened in 2013 can have no bearing legally on what happens in 2022 or 2023. Hello, Michelle from Terre Haute, Indiana. Yes, hello, Terre Haute. Had a chance to see Terre Haute a few times there on Live PD. Terre Haute, that's that's right. That's where the Columbia Record Club used to be. Oh God, I miss the days of the Columbia Record Club. I think I still owe them money from like 30 years ago. Oh, those were the days. Ricky wanting to know again. No date has been announced for an LPFM window yet, right? No. Again, the issue, it's between COVID-19 and LMS are really I really think are the two big issues that are holding up any progress right now with any filing windows, including Auction 106. I don't think that the issue is necessarily as much the COVID-19 as it was the LMS issues. That's just my suspicion. Al Davis was mentioning that on the Channel 6 issue, that full service stations can get around the Channel 6 issue by using vertical polarization. Yes, full service stations are normally required to operate a minimum of a horizontal polarization, or they can run they can run circular or dual polarization. But they have to have at least a horizontal element. The exception, though, is for stations in the reserve band they can use a vertical only antenna for protecting channel 6. Now the channel 6 rule for full service 73 as at 525 I think is a bit more complicated and more complex, but it actually allows various things. Number one, it allows there to be population in the overlap zone in the area. If there is contour overlap between a NCE station and a channel 6, I believe there's a 3,000 population allowed in the overlap, and then if you use a vertical polarization antenna, that only, if you go vertical only, then I think that credits you more people or more interference area, and such like that. But there are some rules around that. Those rules do not exist in translator world, so we're not even gonna go there. You know, in my opinion, I think we're a little bit. I think we're a little bit too going a little too crazy on the no population within any overlap. I don't see a problem with de minimis in a population within an overlap. You know, if there is like like on a second adjacent, there should be no reason on a second adjacent overlap where if the number of population that's impacted is, let's say, less than maybe like 5/10 of 1/2 of 1% of a station's overall service contour, maybe not exceeding 3,000 persons, that would be considered acceptable interference. We had a petition for rulemaking out a while back. It's still sitting out there in RM status, which would allow basically the reverse of the Raleigh waivers for full service. And basically what that's saying is, in the full service reserve ban, that a new station could ask for a channel and not be required to meet second or third adjacent interference where the proposed station is proposing a new interfering contour inside of the protected contour of a second or third adjacent station, and then saying that, well, the actual number of people that are being interfered with is de minimis, and and I threw out the number of 1/2 of 1%, and no more than 3,000 persons, because to me that would make sense. There's no reason that a translator, for example, can't have a small amount of population within the second adjacent. And right now for LPFM, we can't do that because of statute. We'd have to get the LCRA changed to allow for that on second adjacents in LPFM. But the FCC really needs to rethink about some things, and of course the NAB is going to fight us. And the funny part about it is that during these conversations, and one of the comments I kept getting asked, especially from the majority, was, has the NAB contacted you? Have you and the NAB been talking? And I said, no. NAB won't speak to me. The NAB doesn't want to deal with me. I've put out the the information on I don't know. I've written many articles and such, published articles in Radio World, and I put the olive branch out there, and I said, listen, LPFM and full service are both facing a threat from something even bigger, and it's called non-radio. Look for an article. It was from, I think, April, or it was late summer. I wrote it in April because I wrote it during NAB. I was triggered by a Bob's Burgers episode to write this article, and it was finally published in like July in Radio World. And I put an olive branch in there, and I said, listen, NAB, feel free to contact us. Let's work together on this. Ricky's like, oh, I thought so. And yes, I hear from our consultant that LMS is fun. Oh, wait. LMS is fun when it works. It is actually an easier system. It's a flow that makes sense. If they can get this damn thing to work right, yeah, it's definitely much better than clunky CDBS. But that also means they need to get the back-end data working right, too. And that's one of the other problems. As a database provider, as a user of raw data, yeah, they are definitely lacking on the back end where it comes to LMS versus CDBS. I'm having to do all kinds of workarounds. I'm getting ready to build more workarounds to, to compensate for the data that is not coming in from LMS correctly into the raw data. I'm actually going to have to be going in and actually parsing applications. We already parse applications that are filed. We use that for what we call our CDBS and LMS bots that basically display the information on FCC .today, as well as those like when you go to fccdata.org and a modification was filed today, and then within 20 minutes you see that listing on fccdata.org. That's because of the screen scraping that we're doing over here on the FCC applications. So yeah, a lot going on here. I think that's pretty much all we have for now. Now next FCC, here's the deal now. FCC meeting is going to be coming up here on the 23rd. Ooh, that is close. So that means we may get a sunshine notice today. That means that today, I would plan on, oops, that's not the one I wanted. I would plan on today being the last day that you can push the FCC on anything. I think today is going to be the final day. Because what happens is within seven days before the meeting, the FCC issues a sunshine notice. And after the day after the sunshine notice, you can't talk to any staff, any decision-making personnel at the FCC in respect to a pending rulemaking. So today is the last day to talk to anybody at the FCC. So we'll probably follow up with a letter explaining what's happened over the past week and still supporting our issues and positions and such. So probably after I get off this live chat, that's what we're going to be doing. Wow. If anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat now. This is the last call. But anyway, the commission meeting is scheduled for the 23rd of April, so basically 1 week from today. If they do this like they've done previous meetings, they will be doing it remotely, and chances are they will be voting on the items before the meeting date. So you're going to see a lot of deletions from items on the agenda, and you're going to see a lot of reports in order and a lot of decisions come out here in the next week. Let me give you the taste of reality in this whole thing. The taste of reality is simply that the commission is not going to move forward with a further notice at this time. Simply, mainly because a lot of it has to do with timing. We're pushing this a week or two before sunshine, and this really doesn't give them enough time. PI is not going to delay this proceeding, and delaying this proceeding would only make things worse for everything else. And I would not support delaying the proceeding. If this gets taken off of the agenda this month, it may be another year before it's back on again. We also have an election in November. We don't know who the majority is going to be come January. We don't know that yet. So until that happens, we're kind of stuck. So, here's the thing. If this issue or the directional antenna issue, which that might make it, because that seems to be a fast issue, and what we're asking for is very, very much close to what the NAB, the NAB doesn't want us to have directional antennas. And the NAB is under this impression that we want carte blanche on directional antennas. And I'm saying, no, we don't. We just want these two scenarios added to the existing directional antenna rule. The FCC might see that as kind of a quasi-agreement between the low-power side LREC and the full-power side NAB, and actually come together and say, okay, we screwed up, and we'll just add these two items. International and Channel 6. And that's all I want them to do. That's all I wanted them to do anyway with the big items off the table, with 73.815 regimes and backstops off the table, with translator relief off the table. Just those two items, International and Channel 6, added to second adjacent and public safety. Simple. How can it get any simpler than that? That might make the rulemaking. But what will happen is this. If LP 250 is not there as a further notice, we can stretch this proceeding while still not keeping the other items at risk. And that would be, of course, through a petition for reconsideration. You know, I've already advised the FCC that if the 250 and the DAs don't make it to the final report and order, we will be going to recon on this. Also, too, on the translator relief issue, either REC or I'm hoping others. I'm hoping really that the LPFM coalition, the Sharon Scotts, the Paul Bames and such, step up on that side and file recon on the translator relief issue. Because that's really that is really hurting some of the existing, especially some of the urban LPFMs. That's really hurting them. But you know, I've already told commissioners, staff, that we'll go to recon if necessary. At least reconsideration will allow us to stretch the proceeding, still allow the other items that are in the proceeding to go to actually get published in the Federal Register and go to rules. So the 13.3 extensions and stuff like that, that'll go to rules. You know, we've got a recon right now on the original 19.3. It's not my recon. It was filed by Michael Cousins and Alan Korn, and it had to do with MX groups and the ability to have secondary MX assignments, where, you know, if there's a, you know, if an MX group is decided and there's another qualified group that's orphaned in that same MX group, they can do what they can still have their channel, and despite this other group winning, then they should be able to have the channel in their area too. That's what they're arguing for. I support what they're arguing for. I support the secondary selectees like that. So yeah, it's been a very busy week. Just so you know, we're coming out of an operational delay. Those who are waiting for invoices will be getting them here in the next few days. During this whole coronavirus, I'm just going to make it clear, my family takes priority over everything. I'm just going to say it right here. My family takes priority over everything. And then we deal with LPFM response to Corona. Fortunately, there isn't a lot of activity like from the FCC and other places. I know there's a lot of questions out there regarding support, SBA loans, stuff like that. Unfortunately, I I see a lot of information about that. Unfortunately, that part of the business side is really not necessarily much of my skill set. This is why I'd probably make a terrible station manager, because especially on the nonprofit side, because I don't know that much about the grants and the grants and the loans and the stuff like that. But I know there's stuff out there. Again, that's why I suggest that LPFM stations join NFCB, join the National Federation of Community Broadcasters. There's a lot of information right now inside the NFCB membership channels right now on a lot of this stuff for stations to get support. There has been I think there's been a little bit of talk about it in the LPFM Solidarity group. So if you're not over there right now, head on over there. That's LPFM Solidarity on Facebook. That's that group is not operated by REC. That group is actually more closely aligned in, like with the LPFM coalition, the folks that actually run the stations and such. So, we're trying the hardest we can. Thank you, Dwayne, for your comments. And I think we are pretty much at that point where I think we're done. We had a visit from the cat, and I think we're done. So last call for alcohol, last call for comments. Again, thank you everyone for your patience during this time, and we're going to do what we can to continue to address the current pandemic emergency, how it's affecting radio. There's been a couple good things that have happened. Keep in touch. We're going to let you know what's going on. All I ask is that if you have any crazy ideas for an STA or something you want to throw by the commission, I ask you to put it by me first for an opinion. Of course, I can't stop you from doing anything, but keeping in mind that I know what's going on right now, I know what people are asking for, I know what thought processes are, and I also have an idea of what the thought process is right now at the commission. I don't want to bog the commission down with a ton of unnecessary, unreasonable, not unnecessary, unreasonable requests. And there was a little bit of chatter after Boston got their temporary power increase. And, fortunately, we've had to quash a few misunderstandings of what constitutes a need for a power increase. And in that case, unless you're in the public sector, you're providing, and you are the first responder agency, there's really not a lot of justification right now for power increases on LPFMs. Again, we'd have to look at each individual case. And I know we've had Katrinas out there in the past, but right now we don't have tons of stations off the air like we did in Katrina. So, just some things to think about there. All right, with that, I think it's about that time. We've been doing this for 85 minutes, 90 minutes or so. So, with that, I'm going to say good day from Riverton, and please, everybody, stay safe. Keep your family safe. We're all in this together. And, keep your listeners safe. And do everything that you're doing. Because let us show that radio, whether you're low power, full power, commercial, non-commercial, internet only, part 15, doesn't matter. We're all in this together. Let's do what we can for our listeners. Let's do what we can for our community. We'll talk soon.